because he's going to discuss it.
Yeah. It's a theory.
Marshall's going to discuss it after
Yeah.
the table doesn't decide what needs to go in your
Yeah,
package
yeah.
moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, it is to youth. It is to youth clientele. Spa-like services to youth clientele.
Yes, for little kids.
Seriously, I don't even go to the spa. And my son had to turn in an application for the National Honor Society. Why would he give him the Honor Society this year?
Deadlines are deadlines, right?
Oh, but I ran. Yes, yes. There are days I have to go for someone who is so incredibly smart.
So socially nice.
Okay, we ready?
Yeah.
Well, if it's 7 o'clock, I might as well call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Parham. Day.
Here.
Ring.
Here.
Lurson.
Here.
Swinfer. Here. Edwards.
Here.
Okay, looks like we got a nice quorum, full house. Typically on the agenda, we have citizens' time for anybody who has wants to speak to the ARB about anything that's not associated with the COA. Is there anybody out there? I think all you guys have COAs, right? Okay, then we'll move on to minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, January 28th, 2015.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion, corrections, or anything? I didn't see anything. Okay. I guess we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good. I guess that's all we got, are the January meetings. For some strange reason, I thought we had one more set.
I thought we did too. Guess not.
We didn't meet last week. Nah,
Yeah,
last month.
month.
We didn't meet last month, yeah.
That too.
Okay. That means we can move directly into,
I make a motion to approve zoning permit ZP 2015-0312 for Little Divas Day Spa at 4452 Costello Way.
okay, I have a motion. Anybody feel like seconding it?
Well, I'll second it, but I thought we were going to discuss them before we started.
Okay.
We would be the only group that doesn't do it, that does it that way.
I'm okay with that, though. Then we'd have the discussion. We wouldn't have to keep amending them when we make changes.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, we can do it in,
I'll second it now, but
Okay.
prefer to do it the other way if anybody else has a problem. I mean,
which is fine. I mean,
then we won't be amending everything and revoting.
okay. So it's up for discussion. Anybody have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a distinct and unified pattern from the front of the building. And there's other applications that did it before that will match that. In this case, because it's not seen from Washington Street or as you approach from the west and from the rear of the building, it's appropriate to create some of the different variation in what's shown on the plan.
Yes, it does. And that's the same reasoning we did with the 4401 sign. And, it definitely conforms and looks a little bit nicer with the 4401 sign.
On the back, you see the document shall have that sign level with the 4410, so there'll be some standards in the lower end of the building, within the brick, within the center block rather than the brick, so I think it will create
Is there a menu sign for that building?
funny you should ask, because it's one of the largest signs we have.
Right.
Most people don't see it, so.
Right. So
We have a big sign.
are they also on that?
No.
Are they going to be on that, though? There's no room, or?
We're not going to be because we're not a storefront. So we're not full.
Really? Now, that's kind of disappointing, because for me, I think that even more so, they should be on a menu sign.
That's up to the building owner, isn't it?
We have the, what's that?
Yeah.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
It's up to the building owner.
Yeah, no, I realize that.
Yeah.
I just, okay.
So part of the sign, new sign ordinance that we're coming through, I think we probably want to have, put this on your talk about, rear businesses to the rear building, how they advertise, second floor businesses, how are they advertised?
Mm-hmm.
but from an ordinance perspective, this meets the ordinance.
Right.
Is it a solid sign, like,
Or are these letters, or, no?
No, it appears to be on a white background,
white wood?
Final lettering.
so a rectangle.
The application said metal for the back. We got to do,
You cross it off and
White, black, pink, signature logo for front style.
Yeah.
Wood sign, oh, it is crossed out metal. It says wood. Yeah, I don't have any issues with it.
I'm fine.
Now, this particular building has a pre-approved sign package, which I think is way too restrictive, but is that a technicality? Is that gonna be a technical problem?
That's my first statement, that the front of the building will remain
Okay.
consistent. This being a business to the rear.
It won't apply? The existing won't apply?
Well, they definitely need their sign, so I don't have any issues with it.
Okay, I think everybody's done with their discussion, right? Okay, so we'll put it to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. It passed. Congratulations.
Thanks, and thanks for being here.
You guys are done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I guess we'll move on to certificate of appropriateness for B. I guess we'll open it up for discussion. We won't move for it yet.
All right, so it's HOA approved,
Uh-huh.
and all the colors are within the,
Those are the colors there.
It's right here.
The only issue I had was the initial submission had within 3 feet, the ordinance says, you know, like, even 5.
5.
You know, then the
okay.
height is 15 feet, there wasn't none of that.
They're 12, yeah.
Yes, that's the only thing I would review. You can technically see it from the road, so we try to be consistent about that, and that's why it's reported. So.
All right.
I make a motion to approve zoning permit ZPZ 0150217.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. I guess we'll go directly into the vote.
So that's ZP.
Is that a 2 or a Z?
That's
Okay.
ZP, I'm sorry. ZP.
Don't let it happen again. So changed.
Okay, so we'll put it to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Looks like it passes. Okay. Now, I guess, you plan on hanging around, Marchant, right? I don't have to rearrange the schedule for you or anything?
No, sir, Mike Orban has asked to speak with you briefly as an informal follow-up to last month's meeting. I'm not sure we're able to put that on the agenda.
Yeah.
And then Denise and I had some administrative things we want to talk to you about in the meeting.
Okay. So I guess, is it okay if we bring these people into talk since they're waiting around under the agenda at this point as opposed to...
Let them know that typically it needs to be done ahead of time for next time.
Falling on my sword on this one. I got involved kind of at the late hour. Last month when we had spoken, you had asked me to follow up, and it took me several weeks to do that. So I responded to, this is Mike Gorman. Bud Burke, who spoke with you last month. I had responded to them, referring them to the various planning documents, material requirements they're going to need. With Mike, he had asked, they wanted to at least kind of give a general direction of where they're going, get some initial responses, and then they'll come back next month with adjacent property photographs, material samples,
Okay,
of the work. So it's a little bit out of turn, but partially my issues.
okay.
And technically, if we all voted to, we could change the agenda, but it requires a unanimous vote.
To add this to it?
Yeah, to change the agenda in the middle, yes.
Gotcha. I have no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, he's here. They're
Go
here.
ahead.
We're here.
Okay. We don't want to take a lot of your time. We appreciate you taking the time to allow us to come in and sort of revisit where we were. I did have my architect here last month, and actually it was in January, to review sort of a submission so that we didn't want to go too far down the road without knowing where we were going. And so we had proposed this elevation here, and the feedback that we got from the Architectural Review Committee, or the board, was that you wanted more of a craftsman-style design. So we took this plan and we revised it into this plan. A lot of the design. A lot of the design is driven by the footprint. So these footprints, and Marshawn and I talked about this briefly earlier, these footprints do align with the approved site plan. So you give this the footprint, and basically as an architect he has to start with that. Then he has to build the inside to see what it's going to look like. And then from there we develop elevations that work with that footprint. And that's how we came up to this streetscape. And the changes we made from the previous application, we removed the shutters, we added some additional bay windows and some metal roofing. We've added a belt across the siding in some cases. We've added variations of siding, both horizontal and vertically, and even within that, the textures will change. So they may be a twin 6 to start with, and then it may rotate to an 8-inch based on what he thinks works best from an architectural standpoint. So that's where we are.
I'd like to see more color. Because usually with craftsmen, you have multiple colors.
And here's a bigger version of the same thing. So, and these colors would vary a little bit, so we haven't colorized anything, but I wanted to point out that we can change the color within the elevations, which I think is an important element. And you can see how the vertical texture changes on the siding here. And the roof variations run accordingly. It's just as important to me as a home builder to make sure that this works together as a group. So when I do all my work, I try to make sure we lay out all the houses in order. We've even done as many as 40 or 50 in a row, so we make sure we don't repeat the same elevations and the same patterns. So that's why I've asked Doug to lay out the 5 of them as they come across here. As you get down to the corner on lot 52, which is on the corner of Blight and Washington Street, as we turn the corner, we retained a pretty strong elevation on that corner. Now, the driveway is over here on this side. So from a practicality standpoint, people want to come up their driveway and then go in their front door. So the front door faces onto Blight, but the elevation on the side of the home, which is on Washington Street, should be a really nice complement to what's there. And this would turn the corner, lack of a better word. So, and we have a couple plans that we're going to leave here, and you guys can futz with. I can give them to you now if you'd like to look at them. This is a smaller version, and this is a larger version of the same thing that I have on the boards. So they're just printouts. And so the other comment that we received from the committee was how are the backs of the houses going to look? So then as you turn the corner on Blight, I think it's actually this way, right, Doug? Yeah. So this would be the rear elevations of the houses as they face onto the town property. Okay? In addition to that, we have an approved landscaping plan, which is here, which was done as part of the site plan, which the town council had us do, which is a very heavy planting plan that runs along the back of our houses, which is here, and then turns and runs down across a number of the houses that are existing.
And those plantings are on town property?
Those plantings are on town property. Yep. So we're going to put them in, and you guys can take care of them.
Talk about the change in elevation.
The ground that's out there now, if you go by there, we'll bring in some photography when we come in next month. But the ground that's out there now, we're going to actually lower that down a little bit so we can get our houses a little lower to the ground. So we've proposed and have actually approved the installation of a small retaining wall between the back of our property and the town property. It's approximately 2 feet tall, so it's just enough to allow us to get the backyards down a little bit and get the elevations of the houses down a little bit on both Blight Avenue and Washington Street.
It's ours.
Okay, so you're gonna look at
No,
Okay.
So when you're saying right along your property line, you want to build a retaining wall to drop your lots down?
That's correct, and that's already approved. That's already in the approved site plan. That retaining wall and those grades are already set.
When we do a 2-foot retaining wall, are you going to fall jurisdiction to needing a railing?
Should be less than needing a railing.
36 inches, I believe.
Yep.
3 feet of railing.
Yep.
I think the reason why I brought it up to, yeah.
It's
It's been a
3.
while since I've looked at that, but
It's
it's
3.
3 feet.
And I guess the reason why I'd asked him to was less about the railing, but was more about, Harover sits at a hill, and it slopes away. So when I was talking to him is when you're driving into town, are you going to have a Blight Drive have this uniform line of houses at all at the same elevation? And so what we talked about was there's going to be so small enough variation where the homes are going to follow the topography along Blight Drive. Does that make sense? So if you're driving into town, the houses are going to be highest, probably kind of highest on the right, and then slightly come down to street level. So I think what that does is plays nicely into the topography in that area, rather than having these houses that are kind of high up above Blight Drive and don't match. It's going to look silly having hair over it, kind of that slope, and then having these houses at a higher elevation. Can you see it in your head what we're talking about? So.
You got the Harover properties, which are like single stories, this at least kind of levels it out.
right.
So if you're at the top of Harover, sitting at the Harover house, the front porch of the Harover is almost level with the second story of Haymarket Station across the street. There's that much of a change in elevation. But it's not as noticeable given the distance. But these houses, we're going to close that distance real quickly. And so I think it's an important element that they're going to change a little bit in elevation, and I'll follow that. So, in terms of the wall requiring, that'll be done through the.
I'm just thinking, it's been a while since I've actually had to deal with this, but if you have a porch or something, and you that's like 18 inches.
Yeah.
Step down, and you have that rail. Yeah, the rail has to be 3 feet high, sure.
Well, I guess if,
It's a
yeah.
step down
Right, I'm not seeing any
that
of the
is more than,
columns.
I thought it was going to be.
The building code is
36 feet.
It is 30?
Yeah, but deck is more 30 inches off the
There's some of that
ground
funky
back
roof
at the
line.
railing.
Okay, so.
Now, it may be different for retaining walls out in the field.
Yeah, but I guess more importantly, when it comes through, when they file their actual construction plans, if it does require a railing or something like that, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the materials. So, yeah. So, or maybe even do like a step on the
But they don't have
landscape.
any porches, do they? There's the column. Right, there's that one, because I don't think they have porches like those do. I don't
You
think
get the
they
grades
have
different
space
without
for
having
it.
a 4 or 5 feet of.
The other thing I talked to Bruce about too
I
was
think so.
3D. These houses, I'd asked what about the sharp kind of angles of the roof line, and what that relates to is they're going to be like a hip roof. So you won't necessarily see the sharp roof lines like that. Did I say that correctly? It's more of a hip roof on top.
That is correct.
So,
Yeah, as this turns the corner, we bring that roof elevation down so that it comes down the hill. So it should work pretty well with that elevation on the side.
and who does the retaining wall belong to? Is that the town or the community?
It belongs to the owners. It's on their property. It will be on each individual lot's property.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah. It's not going to be HOA property.
There's
It's
not
going
going to be common, a narrow strip of common ground
there's-
out there. It's homeowner and then town.
That's
it.
correct. That's
Okay.
it, right. And the buffer, the landscaping buffer is being planted on the town property.
Right.
So that will be higher already than the existing houses in the back and create some privacy, which is what we wanted to do, and which we think what our buyers are going to want. They're going to want some break between that and the town park.
Yeah.
What do you see the visible surface of that retaining wall being?
Less than these two steps.
No, I'm sorry, material.
Oh, It'd probably be some sort of masonry material. That seems to have the longest life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I assume that. I meant like, was it just me, you know?
Oh, does it show timber? Okay. We have a timber wall shown on there. That's what it's on there. Yeah.
If you want to do something different, we can talk about it.
Right. Okay. All right.
So one of the things to talk about too is, I'm trying to
It has the little
myself
columns.
a little more, your process is what the community design policies say. A lot of it talks about sensitivity to the Sears homes, or actually we can't call them anymore, it's something else.
Reynolds, aren't they? Reynolds?
homes. Also matching or kind of a blend of what you see at Haymarket Station, and also creating built over time. So I think having the noticeable changes in different elevations creates enough variation that it's a specific, get away from the cookie cutter.
Yeah.
I have a question about lots 49 and 48.
Yes.
I cannot tell from this drawing or that drawing, are there any, like the other ones have the columns on that are so typical to Craftsman style? By the front, front door, front porch, whatever, are there?
Partial column.
Yeah, that's,
I don't think so. All right.
Yeah,
None of them are large enough to have like,
Yeah, they've got them on these three, these four.
You see 48,
But not on
we're right
these.
at the build line.
One of the things,
So I guess that's, these are just cantilevered, they're not
We
supported,
have room for those kind of things down
they're
here.
just little roofs,
Yeah.
cantilevered.
one of,
Hey, you're tired of me talking, aren't you? Okay, so one of the things they asked me was architectural features, and I was able to say bay windows, porches, balconies, chimneys may project 2 feet into the required setback or building restriction line.
Okay.
2 feet's, a little bit.
So that, that would help us out. I
Yeah.
drew this up, not assuming that, but we can put some bay windows in front of that 18 inches, little metal roof on top.
well, yeah, I like to see the columns and that are typical of Craftsman.
Yeah, but you don't
Yeah,
need to see
but I
them on every single house.
No,
I
just,
don't know, like you say, I mean, that, particularly that end lot is so.
well, it looks like there's a
incredibly
portico or overhang on,
there is a very small one there. We tried to get the elevation
it's
to break
actually
up.
the one next to it looks even
Too.
bigger,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it
we
may
have a
not
smaller
be.
one. But now that we have a little more room to work, this may change slightly with the next
We could come
application.
out with this,
Sorry.
We could come out with this porch roof then another 24 inches then. Is that
Okay.
right? Yeah, because this comes right up to the line, which I'm pushing right there. And
Right.
I'd love to, as a designer,
Yeah.
I'd love to have it come out more, get a little more
Okay.
shadow room there and that kind of thing.
All right.
So I would just put out there that you don't necessarily need to see the same column on.
Right.
No,
No,
but-
but it is stereotypical of
There
Craftsman.
are other Craftsman features that they have more room to add now.
You can also do a
Yeah, we have another 2 feet, as long as we
Right.
don't have
Right.
livable
It's on this
space
floor.
in there, we can come out with a porch roof.
Right, okay.
Or,
Yeah,
or a
exactly.
bay window, 18 inches
Okay.
out, box bay.
Yeah.
And we did add these brackets here that are underneath a lot of the eaves. Okay, so there's a variety of those scattered throughout the product. So, and I'm in agreement with you.
do a bracket or something on those that portico right there on 49 or
Yeah.
something, you know, that.
And, well, yeah, this is a bay window as shown here. I wasn't too sure I could put it in, but see, that really helps that elevation out a lot. And this detail, this isn't a bay window, this is a little roof over the window.
Right.
Sorry. Like that, so, but it helps out, gives a little shadow line, a little
Right.
bit, the metal roof, a little bit of
Gives you a
color.
little bit of leeway to add more Craftsman, yeah.
Yeah. And now I heard something about the color. They're going to have different.
We're
We
gonna-
haven't even gone into that
We haven't
yet.
got into that yet, but one of the
Okay.
things I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on is that one of the things we could do within the Craftsman design is mix colors on the same flat elevation, which I
Yeah,
think,
which is what we would love to see.
okay, that's great to know. And obviously,
At least for me. I don't want to speak for everybody, but
Yeah,
and
I'm
there is,
fine with that.
there's no brick shown anywhere. We don't intend to, brick wouldn't be
Craftsman didn't have a
inappropriate.
lot of brick, I mean, even the hair over, they've got stone on their columns and everything else is siding.
Right, right.
yep, no.
Another thing we can do here is, which really doesn't show up on these little renderings, is we can change the reveal of the siding. We can have like 8 inches down below and like 4 inches above, you know. like that.
Right, right.
So What he was
Well,
talking
siding
about
has a
was-
reveal, that's how much between the horizontal lines of the siding. So we'd have like 8 inches maybe down below and like 6 inches or 4 inches above, so it'd be a narrower siding pattern.
What it does for us from an element standpoint is it gives us texture and gives us the ability to, things change within that flat elevation across the front, which is a really nice element to add. And he's modified that by adding the belts in here, so, to get that done.
Just to throw it out there, I mean, it's somewhat of that 6 on top and cantilever the 2 by 6 out the 2 inches, so that you actually, so the upper portion is kind of cantilevered out
Right.
a certain amount.
Yep. I think we can accomplish the same aesthetic look with that by simply putting that belt there, whether maybe it's a 5/4 board or whatever. I have some problems with those when I build them out. They leak a lot. So,
We don't want
things that
that.
I can do that prevent those
Yes.
future elements from my buyers is always a good thing, so.
And another thing here is the window trim. The Hero House has a typical Craftsman detail having tapered trim on the side, and we have straight trim here and tapered trim on a couple other ones to kind of give it a mix. Here's another. I only have one copy. You can pass it around. Another production house with vinyl siding where we use the tapered trim, and cost sensitive product there, but came across looking pretty good.
So what kind of siding are we thinking about at this point? Like cardboard or?
It'll probably be all a vinyl combination. Yep. Some of the new stuff today is quite good, and it's going to be driven pretty much as we finalize these plans out, what we're going to up with it.
The builder messed up the shed dormer on that. It's not like my drawings.
Something, hearing that, I'm not excited about that.
Yeah, there are a lot of
Again,
nice
the
lines.
period houses
in here.
Right, right.
So,
But we're not talking historic, we're talking new homes, so.
but that is kind of, I mean, they're coming really close, they got this big design, and then they use vinyl siding.
I'm not sure as a homeowner if
Well, as a
I
homeowner,
want
I
something that
prefer
wasn't.
vinyl siding.
We're asking for samples next month.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's make
You wanna
it
say something?
possible. That's my view as a homeowner.
It brings it down quite a bit.
I talked to Mike and we make sure we're going in the right direction, so. Let's see behind you, easier to see. So the one change they had here, so they changed the 2 design there, and that was to go with the Craftsman and doing the windows. See what the difference is? I thought it was okay, but want to make sure you guys weighed in on it. And then this one over here kind of changed the same way too. They're incorporating more of the Craftsman elements. I'm not sure what you call that style on the bottom. So that's a problem. I don't have all the jargon. So those were the most distinct, other than these creating more of the Craftsman elements. These seem to be the biggest variation between the 2 plans. So
Okay.
they're looking for some general direction on where to go. So just want to make sure that's a key element to changing the facade. So want to make sure the ARB was comfortable with those changes.
I guess the better question is, are you comfortable with the proposed revisions to the elevations
I'm
that
sorry,
we've got?
that's what I meant
Yeah,
to say.
yeah. So if you're good with where we are on that, we'll continue down our road and make an application next month, hopefully with all that stuff on there. And then if we need to tweak it or add a piece of trim here or
Yeah.
look at some different elevations.
The only thing I noted was kind of you have the angle up here and then the angle down there, but the change in elevation I think will be fine. So. Cool.
Okay.
No, I have a couple, one quick
Go
comment,
ahead.
if I may.
Go ahead.
Actually, I mean, in general, it's working pretty well. Push comes to shove, I am a little disappointed still in lot 52. That one was the weakest elevation before, and it still is. And that is really our most important.
Oh, the one that turns, it's on the corner?
That,
Yeah.
Right there on the corner, that is when you walk it, when you drive into Haymarket, boom, now you're in the town of Haymarket. And, I mean, actually, like 49, 48, I think, well, this is pretty interesting stuff going on there. And actually, 50 and 51, they got some pretty cool stuff. And then 52, just kind of like, I mean, the front facade, this was okay, it's all right. But the side facade, which is really our front facade,
Right.
just not really stepping out and saying, hey, welcome to Haymarket, now you're in
It's got the gables.
a distinct little town. It's still looking like the side of a house.
But is that because we're not, but is that because,
House.
I know that.
is it because we're not seeing the different textures and things that are going to be used on there? Like,
It could be.
We want to make it up front by putting like some type of metal roof over there or something like they did here.
I think we could look at maybe carrying this porch around the corner, Doug.
Well,
Would it go?
yeah, if we, well.
It would be little.
I don't want a 2-foot porch around the corner. I like a porch where
You can actually walk on
we
it.
can carry a 2-foot porch around the corner, whether it's gonna, carry the day or not, I doubt
That's gonna look strange in its own
Yeah.
right.
I'd rather have no porch than a 2-foot porch.
Yeah, because you're all the way up
Right
against the
there on
line, yeah.
setback and the line there.
We can continue to look at some choices that we can do with that and make sure we get it to look good.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah,
that,
flip-
because that one is so important.
Yeah, flip that over, let me see the lot.
Yeah, maybe try to enhance
Yeah.
make it look more like a front by,
You got,
like you did with some of the other frontal elements of the house, like the metal roof or something, maybe
yeah. But
put
you-
some
yeah,
type
you're
of
gonna
like
have
roof
something
over the
that you gotta
windows
fix,
or
because
something.
you're
If you could have it
right
labeled
on the
or
line.
something.
We're right on the line. Yeah.
Part of
Yeah.
it is your sample roof.
Or, you know, something to kind of give it more of a frontal accent or something.
Can you drop that, the look at the rear? I mean, yeah, I mean, the rears are the same, I mean, actually, a lot, I mean, the way you brought the downspouts down on, I mean, the downspouts down on the side walls. No, I'm saying the downspouts, are those just accent corner?
Well, the downsides will be on the corner boards, but yes, yeah. But
Yeah, that's fine, it breaks it up, it's nice. You've done that on 48,
But
49, and
52 is
50.
still the,
And you don't do it on, well, I know the
That's
roofs are
odd.
different, but, 51 and 50, big, long facade there. And again, those are the ones closest to Washington Street. I don't know what you could do to break up those long, and again, being vinyl siding, then you have these long segments of vinyl siding on lot 51 and 52. I don't know if you can bring a corner board or just bring a downspout down the middle, down part of it or something. But, yeah,
or just change the texture of the siding.
correct.
Bring this sort of an element around.
Visual interest to it.
Yeah.
Well, exactly, you're right, bring your band board around the back, and you could do your board and batten
Right.
up top, and then your horizontal lap siding
Marshall,
on
is
the
that the
bottom.
site plan?
Nice.
Can I see that?
But yeah, I guess what I'm asking you for, about 52 especially, I think it's a little more gingerbread, and actually, you could actually push that particular house, I don't want to speak for everyone, but a little more towards the Victorian feel, because, I mean, I know that the Craftsman and the Victorian, they're all the same time period, but just something a little more.
With more
lot
interest.
50 A little more interest.
Okay.
And I ask you to spend a little more money on 52, is what we're really asking you to do. A little more trim, a little more pizzazz on 52. I don't know. I don't think a dormer would do too well in that little open. I mean, that's gonna be a lot of roof right there on 52.
I was noticing is how much
That's
roof
what-
there
yeah,
is.
That's a boatload of roof coming down. And that little reverse gable there, 2-story section, is not quite enough to offset it.
Can you bring this up, Bruce? Bring that off, so the front here, here's the elevation.
Well, yeah, I was trying to bring the roof line down, just around the corner, so I didn't have, 18
I got
feet of,
you.
it helps return the corner, you can bring the roof line down. Maybe there's a couple of different ways I can handle that, but I like bringing the roof line down and get us around the corner.
The other thing too is with the one on 52 is that if we're assuming the front faces Washington Street, this calls the rear to it. To me, if it's going to be facing Washington Street here, the true rear of the building should be back here, if it's going to face that way. But I don't think Bruce should have enough, because the garage, it's the side of the garage, you're putting the bay windows in the back. Just where I'm going, in other words,
Yeah.
when you're looking at it this way, you say, okay, that's the front of the house on Washington Street, the back of the house is here, but even though graphically you're showing it, the house itself
Yeah, I know.
is
It's
fronting
tight getting
light.
one out of your own
Is that where you're going, Debbie?
Exactly.
But I've been places in Domingo.
What about, on,
So in other words, right here, if this is Washington Street, I'm standing on Harover, right, and I look at the back of this house, I'm thinking, okay, this is the back of the house that faces light. What we're really trying to do, which I think is good, is they're incorporating this facade on Washington Street, because the Haymarket Station across the way, you can notice all those units, the end units, face Washington Street.
Exactly.
So I think that's a neat element here. I guess what I'm saying is if we're doing three-sided architecture, because this is a house that we want to more or less orient toward Washington Street, does it make sense to create the illusion that this isn't the rear of the house, this is the side of the house on Washington Street?
That makes, exactly. On lot 51 and 50, you have a distinct what's called lopsided, I don't know the technical term, for the gable, the reverse gable in the front, you bring one, you extend the slope on one side. could you do that on lot 52? Just right
On that long roof, you're saying, where
Right
there's,
through here. I mean, obviously your floor plan, I understand that this is too different here. But could you bring this straight across and tie it in with this porch here somehow? You know, to come down here and pick up that line there, something. I mean, that might get you in that direction. Or even, and it would also cut down that roof.
That's what we were noticing too. It's the roof, just too much roof.
You see how you have this?
for the main street.
Right.
A dummy piece here?
Well, I was wondering about a dormer too, but I don't know that you,
In this case, it wouldn't be a dummy one, we got a staircase behind there, so it'd be like coming in there.
oh. Well, that would actually enhance the house.
No, I think really, I'm liking the, again, the extended slope on 51 and 50. Again, the lopsided gable when it keeps coming down. I think that actually might be something to play with on lot 52 and that side elevation of the Washington Street elevation.
Get something like that right there.
To really send home
The only problem is, if there's a stairway there, you're only going to be able to make the dormer so wide. It may be really proportional. It's hard to say without seeing a drawing, but
Roof apparently appears, we do like the hip because the hip roof does bring the house down.
Right.
Lowers the house into the ground, which is always a good thing. So that's just one of the elements that we like to do. But we'll work on
They're
that.
going to end up so cute.
But that house in particular, I would propose to you, would best benefit from the variation of siding. Again, like you have done on 49, you have the board and batten on the upper side. Perhaps that would be appropriate on that particular house. I mean, even if you didn't want it to repeat yourself, take it off those and put it on this one. Again, that's, I want, more attention paid on that one. And I think, what I think you might have mentioned, to bring the band board, because actually, as you've got it shown right now, that band board right here is a single board coming across the front and stopping. Boom, it stops right there. Right.
Doesn't carry around the band.
Yeah. So that would be a much more powerful statement to have that come just turn the corner and then run along, and then hopefully perhaps something else happens. Here somewhere.
I'd like to make it look like a side of the house rather than the rear of the house. Okay, so just for summer real quick, so they have direction, kind of starting lower. I think what I heard, and this is for Denise's benefit, so 48.
What's he trying to say, Denise?
No, I'm trying to say it's easier to summarize
No, I know.
and get them direction. What were the general synopsis on this? It was comfortable, change in materials, final color.
They can bump out. That was the
You
thing.
can
that
bump
was
out, I guess, was the elements you're looking for there.
2 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I'd heard different widths of siding. Was that something that we're looking at on this one, or no?
That's the way it's drawn.
That's the way it's drawn, okay. Anything else that we're missing?
Again, if you brought the porch out, I'd ask you to look at some of your brackets or
Okay.
columns.
Which they have here. They have the brackets here. So maybe a detail of those brackets.
No, but I'm just saying, repeat that detail or something on the porticos, on
Okay.
the porches, if you will,
These?
the metal roofing area.
Right here? Okay. Here, any other comments?
No, because if there's going to be the bump out at all, then you'll add some architectural detail to that. Yeah, that would be, yeah,
That house,
yep,
now we didn't have room to put it.
right.
Just cantilever that.
So I know you haven't got to this level of detail yet, but this, we're looking at like an asphalt shingle roof? Okay. This would be standing seam metal?
Yep.
Asphalt, standing seam? Okay.
Same.
They have a lot of the elements here. Any other, they're having kind of the same width of siding there. They're having the, what do you call these elements again? The brackets. Okay. Ken, you had some discussion on this one?
No, it's-
51? Okay, was it here? Okay.
Yeah, I was just using the, whatever you call the,
Angle?
the dormer window or whatever that
Okay.
hip roof is, as maybe an element that could work over here. But see, I can't conceptually see this because it looks like it has 2 angles on the roof.
So this is really a hip roof, so this is not, it's, yeah.
goes like that, right?
Here
The
is
fence.
the same plane as
Right?
this whole plane right
Okay.
there. And this line here is the same plane as this plane right here. And this is this gable roof coming from the side, and this gable roof here is coming from the side right now.
Maybe an elevation they can show better that.
Yeah, I just can't get a concept of,
So if you guys think of the,
what this plane, that plane, how they're angled.
yeah, the Gossam House over on the corner, Fayette and Jefferson, right across the way, it's got the black hip roof. That's kind of where it's going from. So 52, trying to wrap the corner, and then, that was my suggestion, was trying to create the appearance on 52, that's a side elevation, not a rear elevation. Any other comments on 52?
I think he gets it.
As far as, back to the retaining wall, real quick, I assume on lot 52, that retaining wall has died out, because the
That's a good
slope
point.
is probably,
This might be with the site plan, yeah.
Actually, it's just the opposite, but that's just to the rear.
Yeah, okay, so it actually does, is that the heavy line that I'm seeing right here?
That was my interpretation, yeah.
Yeah, so it does die out most of the way. Explain it to me. So this is the retaining wall right through here, that dark line right there, that appears to stop right there, halfway through.
Yeah.
So from Washington Street, we're not gonna see the retaining wall that much. I don't, but when you get the plantings on town property there, and again, that the house itself is shielded for the most part.
Not only that, people are going to make plantings in their backyard, and
Absolutely.
it's
So I don't think, I'm not so
gonna
worried, but I was a little concerned.
put
with
patios and all that kind of stuff.
the
It's not
wood
going to.
There's
decking
room.
would not-
If there's
I wasn't
room.
too crazy about that, but again, if we're not really seeing it, I don't see that that's an issue.
I do have one more question. Are there, with that corner lot, is there room for sidewalk that, as we develop the Hanover properties?
So they've accommodated, they're gonna pay $10,000.
Yeah.
We have the right of way for it,
Okay,
so yes, it's not gonna be a sidewalk around that end lot. What they would agree to do is they're gonna do a sidewalk along Blight and do kind of a safe haven at the corner for people that are waiting for the bus.
okay.
And then
Oh,
when we
yes.
develop across
We did talk about
Hanover, they've given us enough right of way, and they're gonna put cash in when they submit their construction plans to facilitate that once we come up
Okay.
with the design. We
Okay,
didn't wanna have a sidewalk to nowhere,
right.
so.
Well, true.
Yeah, that doesn't.
But at
it
some
doesn't
point, it
join
won't be to
anything either.
nowhere. So as long as there's space that we can,
That was part of the subdivision discussion, and yes,
Yeah.
we'll tie in.
Concrete sidewalk?
Concrete along Blight.
Yeah.
For the ordinance, brick along Washington.
okay.
Yeah.
And lastly, I just, Mr. Burke here can give you some great designs, but, the materials are gonna be important, and I really would just like you to price out some little higher grade siding, okay? I mean, you're not using bricks, so that's money saved right there. And, yeah, again, just, something, I'm not such a party border by any set, but something of that nature would be just so much more welcome than vinyl. Sir?
Is there a way to split the baby? Is the focus would be more of those units that we see,
what
maybe
that is.
52 back versus all of them?
Well, I don't know how that would go with his, trying to keep the whole project, have a common.
Uniform.
But, yeah.
Those are elements that we can work through, I think, over time, how we sort of play that out. What we really wanted to do today was make sure we're going down the correct road, and it sounds like we are. And we've gotten some flexibility that's going to provide us to add a couple of elements, and we'll continue to work on 52 until we're all happy.
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys, appreciate your time.
Thank you, board members, for allowing that kind of ad hoc addition.
Need this back?
Sure.
Do we want to give these back to you?
No, I think these are ours.
Okay, who's going to be in charge of them? Who's the keeper of the plans? This is true.
That's fast. Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
You read my mind.
I guess we'll move on.
Do you want to keep this or give it to John? Oh, good, okay.
Light on that corner?
I think that's the one that says that recess.
That's what we couldn't find.
Now there's two.
That's such a small
Hey, Mike?
rendering of,
Do you know where the streetlights are going?
Is yours?
Lampposts, individual lights.
Let's see, they're asking if there's one on the corner.
Is there a light on the street corner? I can't read.
That may come in as part of the streetscape.
Okay,
I know there's one across the street on one of the Cobra heads.
okay,
There's a Cobra head out here, but yeah, they're each going to have their own lampposts.
okay.
Do you need to see those details
No.
on lampposts?
Not yet. I mean, when they bring it.
Okay, cool.
thank
Sorry,
you.
thank you.
By code, there
Thanks.
only needs to be one lamppost there, I think, at the corner.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
That's what the streets.
That,
and
when
the-
the streetscape gets.
Yeah, I think right now there's a Cobra head for safety. They're required
Yeah.
to do that, but
Yeah.
I think eventually the.
But I think that,
streetscape-
by code, I think there only needs to be one. So I don't think you're going to have more than one down there. And those
I was
those
just
things.
curious
Are,
if there
yeah.
was, we were just curious if there was one.
Oh, yeah.
That was all. It was just a-
Yeah, there has to be one.
Yeah, most subdivision ordinance, you had to have it in all your entrances.
Yeah.
So,
We'll move on then. Town council update?
Well, actually, I think Marchant probably can fill in more about the zoning or the sign, how that's all coming, the sign study.
yes, ma'am. So we've been contacted by the consultant to meet with staff to kind of do the initial rundown. I think we gave them a little bit of a task, given the different types of areas that we have in the town. Once they put their final product together, we'll begin running it through the process. We'll bring it through the commission. We'll bring it through you.
Do we have a time frame at all?
Not yet. I'm probably thinking May or June
Okay.
that it comes to you.
And I'll quit asking for a while.
No problem. No, you need to ask. And once that's done, it'll go to hearing.
Okay.
After we go through your initial review, get your comments, feedback, we'll send it to hearing, and then hopefully the council will adopt it by early next fall.
Okay.
We also have the
No, go
charrette
ahead.
next week,
Yeah. What?
or we have the forum next week, stakeholder
Well,
forum.
that's,
Say another charrette, really?
I'm
no,
sorry.
no.
Charrette
It's a
apparently is
public
evil.
forum. I was going to let
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
know, next Tuesday on the 24th at 6 p.m., we're having the public forum for the Harover properties. So it's going to be facilitated. They'll hopefully have 6 to 8 groups. Public will be here, hopefully town council members. I mean, obviously, any or all of us
Be out of town.
to be there. And it's basically the brainstorming and the collaboration of all of it to go forward with some ideas for the Harover property. So that's March 24th at 6. And then the other thing I did want to bring up was Saturday, April 11th is Earth Day. And we are bringing that back under our control. It's going to be like it used to be. I don't know if anybody remembers when we used to go out and actually pick up trash off the streets. So from 8 to 9:30 on that day is going to be the cleanup. We're trying to get the Boy Scouts and any other kind of groups involved. And then from 10 to 11:30, they're going to be doing some learning centers from a bunch of different people coming in, to include Dominion Power, right? Oh, they are not participating now. All right, but I don't know, we're hoping the Bull Run Conservancy will be coming in. We have,
Oh, they are. They absolutely are. By right, they can do that.
Prince William County
That can't be
Solid Waste will be here as well, and the Service Authority.
so there's lots of activities. Obviously, we're trying to gear for the people of the town and the younger kids. And trees will be given out, my understanding.
Are we going to do any shredding, recycling?
At QBE.
At QBE, there'll be the recycling and the shredding down there, the shredding truck. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Is there anything else I'm missing? And
Did we,
anybody have any questions about anything? Okay, that's my news. And I'm holding off on the signs for the town because,
with the new sign?
well, because we were talking about how as we go forward with the design for the town property, that's kind of going to be involved in that as well, right?
That's part of it, yes, ma'am.
Right. So we're kind of putting that on hold for a little bit. I really do, though, and I don't know how y'all feel, but I really do think that the new logo is a good, clean, I mean, I realize our flags still have the old, but now that we have this going, we're going to have to kind of make some decisions. But as we get closer to doing the town property, then we'll zero.
There's definitely going to be a transition to.
And they'll weather fast enough that you can replace.
Yes,
them.
they do, don't they?
I was thinking, once the town comes up with a more formal branding,
Yeah.
then that's what will translate into more of the signage. The master plan has a sign, or some discussion of maybe doing a digital sign, not like down at Tyler that does all the flashy colors. It's kind of a static, forum tonight, something like that, so that we get more word out. So.
Yeah, that's my big pet thing that I've asked for years, is a sign out here that lets you know where you are, but it also has like a little message board.
For
Town
events.
council meeting, public forum, public hearing, because, I mean, you sit in traffic and you're going to
Might as
read
well
it.
do something.
So,
Traffic in this town, is there?
but I think that in a lot of ways would get the message out more so than like even our website, because they have to actually go to the website. This way it's right there in front of them. So I'm hoping that gets incorporated in. So that's kind of the update on that.
How about bylaws?
Bylaws.
It's on my to-do list, isn't it?
We had some drawn up a couple years ago, had them kind of redlined.
Yep, that's something we can come back with.
And so now we just need to take a look at those and see what we want to do from there.
Now, what we did do, as I forgot to say, the council last month adopted a zoning text amendment which changes your review period. It's no longer 14 days, it's now 60.
Yes.
So you have the ability to, if you want to push back and say, well, we're not going to make a decision, come back next month, that's within your window, and anything beyond that, you would need their help. So that was a nice change.
Now, one question I have, now that we're getting into where the Jefferson Street Bridge will be built in about a year's time, how are we coming along with connecting the dead-end path that they're going to be putting in to the corner of our lot out here?
So RDA is an engineer we've hired for the master plan, and they also have the contract for what they call the Connolly Project, which connects the dots. And that's being, I think RDA also has a contract for 66 widening. So we've already done the coordination to see if we can, when we're mobilized, we can do all of that at once. The goal is to have, at the time the bridge is opened, to have that connection made all the way to Washington Street.
So
No.
people don't have to walk in the road.
Correct.
And we will have a full design, kind of like our streetscape, or will it just be kind of like a, let's slap a path in for now and design it later?
So the path is the standard 10-foot asphalt path. The concern was bringing that all the way to the corner is going to have an odd transitioning into our brick sidewalks.
Right.
Because of the code requirements for surface, for ADA, because there's grant money that we're getting from the state and federal government, we have to be sensitive to materials. So right now, and this will come before you ultimately, but widen the brick sidewalk along Washington Street, have that match a width of a stamped concrete path along Jefferson that would then transition to the 10-foot asphalt
concrete.
path.
Concrete.
So
Just like the crosswalks are now the stamped.
Asphalt.
it would be something, but
Yeah.
the concrete's a little more durable than the asphalt, I guess you'd say. But the idea is you'd have a unified width of the sidewalk at the corner. You wouldn't have this odd
And the
asphalt trail
visual.
going. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So,
Can you remind me why this thing's 10 foot wide? Because a 10-foot wide piece of asphalt
Multi-use.
is a road. You know, it's a single lane driveway. So you're gonna have the road, and then you're gonna have a curb, and then you're gonna have another road. You know?
Well, it's because it's
Aren't
for
they-
bikes and
And
walking.
multi-use,
A
so.
painted white stripe down there that says bike path.
Probably.
we haven't gotten to that level of design, but I think it's typically part of the county's adopted transportation plan includes your major collector roads that have a shared use path, and it's typically 10 feet, between 8 and 10 feet, and that's considered the safe width for bicycles, opposing pedestrians.
Like on Prince William Parkway where they have the wide.
We're Route 15.
Yeah,
If you go up Route
exactly.
15 toward Dominion Valley, it's that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a real setback, so you don't
Wasn't there
necessarily get that.
some discussion about a possible short left turn lane like they,
So the plans we're discussing now would widen. So you see what we do on Washington Street right now, where we basically kept the same right-of-way but laned it. We would do something similar here, be a little bit wider, but basically you'd have a center turn lane. And then we're working with the project to the south to receive that. So it won't be as wide as a full, two 10-foot lanes.
But it's something.
10-foot lane, but it'll be similar.
I'm still not going to be able to take my kids through there.
cutting those curves a little close, are you?
I know, with my truck, I smacked the corner.
I've
and
smacked
Well,
the
watching
corner
the
myself.
buses turn at the bank
School
building,
buses.
that's already kind of
It's
a.
very.
That's why the stop bars are set back so far.
Yes.
Because of the vehicles that have to make that tight turn.
Yeah.
So,
So
Okay.
that was my business, unless there's other.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to Planning Commission update.
Speaking of signage, we saw the CIP for the first time, so if we want money for signage, now's the time to, I think Brian is putting together the rough draft still.
yes, sir.
Give Brian an estimate of how much that's going to be, and we can put that in the CIP.
So you have a line item, I think it was 15,000, does that sound right? I can't remember off the top of my head. There's already 15,000 in for town gateway signage.
Right. For next year.
Correct.
But
Right,
yeah,
it's
if we're
already
gonna- if
there.
we're going to do the whole battlefield thing, which I can't remember.
Journey through hologram.
Yeah.
I don't have a copy
Some
of
of
that
this,
one.
yeah, some of that may be expensive. $15,000 may not be enough.
No, we'll have to, and I mean, obviously, we'll be doing it on a smaller scale than some of those pictures we saw.
But, I mean, now is the time to put the money in the budget.
So I think 15,000 would get you a good design plan.
Okay.
And maybe get one or two signs out of it. Maybe
At least the main
we start
gateways.
with maybe the gateways, or we start with the town center one.
Yeah.
But you would have a plan, you could develop a cost estimate, and then later fund that. So maybe you put it in CIP as an unfunded line item, would say 15,000 for design, and then a line item that's unfunded for
Okay.
construction.
Marshawn, have you, and I can't remember who I discussed this with. It's been a couple months ago, when we were talking about signs and the business owners were talking about, recognizability, whatever.
Okay.
In the sign plan, is there going to be anything about using these light poles that have the banners on them? Because you can get banners, it might have been you I was discussing it with, or for, like dining, or they could use those as signage as well.
So I think right now, because of the town structures, we've more or less kind of exempted us from that. But right now, I don't believe there's a suggestion to have banner signs as part of private development.
Brian,
so you're talking about using our signs, or
Brian talked
talking-
about
Yeah.
using drop downs from the banner, actually. Apparently you can have little drop downs off the banner if businesses wanted to do some of their own. I'm not sure about all the details of it, but and part of it is these are doubled, but the new ones are single.
I'm sorry, I was confused. I
So
didn't think you were
there
using
will be
the
a double
existing.
banner.
Yeah.
You're not using the existing ones.
Yes.
I think
And-
that's, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, just to put in place at certain, like, say, down here would be dining, and then.
And there's a talk
Museum
about
and-
taking out of the meals tax. Some of the dining could be maybe funded through some of the meals tax. So
Okay.
there's some ideas throwing around out there.
Yeah.
but-
I think if you're using the existing banners, that's fine. Dine,
that's what I'm
shop,
talking
those
about.
are fine.
Right.
I thought you were talking about there's a lot of shopping centers now that
Oh, no, no,
do
no,
the
no,
banners
no.
in the parking
No, no,
lot.
no, no.
And that's,
No, no.
I don't think we're looking
No,
at
don't
we're
need
talking
any
about what's
banners.
existing there, but,
Okay.
but we have to consider is the new light poles were only single bannered.
What do you mean?
The old light poles are double bannered. They
You
come
could
out
look at
both
crossbars
sides.
on the top.
brackets.
Yeah.
Double
The
brackets.
new
No, I
ones were
understand
single.
that, but honestly, the light poles are so close together that you could skip a light pole and put dining there, and then
You're
put the
right.
town of Haymarket, and that, do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, you could land a plane out there if it was wider, because they're so much.
Because then we'd have a turn lane.
Anyhow,
So
you see what I'm saying?
there's some
though?
ideas being
Yeah,
thrown around out there, yes.
for visibility.
as far as the
I think
businesses
if
go.
it's generic, things like dine, this
Then we
and
can
that,
do that.
I think it's fine, but if you're starting to list particular tenants, that's going to be a little.
Oh,
bit-
no.
Right.
That's an
I'm
equity
talking
issue. You
generic.
probably would-
Right, exactly.
I think that's fine. I would probably bring it through the ARB, just so that you're in agreement for that, but.
Anything else?
No, not from the planning commission.
Okay, any questions for the planning commission?
What's, any new update on the power or anything?
Besides the email that went out?
Yeah, double stack.
The double stack was going to happen. They've had the right to do that since
No, I
day
know.
one. There was no way we could stop it. We could complain all we wanted to.
No,
We
I
could
know.
do whatever we wanted, and they were going to double stack. So the double stack is going to happen. In terms of alternate plans or all the nonsense that's going on up in the mountain, at this point, it's mostly they're going to submit a plan and public comment will open up, and then
Right.
but that's the next phase. Really, at this point, it's they've got to choose a plan and they've got to submit it.
But they're going to have one more public forum for it before it goes to the SCC, according to their email.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well.
Well, I
okay.
mean, I'm just
Yeah, they
saying,
have to
yeah.
have the official
Right.
public comment. They're not going to have another, all these little individual meetings with the
No.
homeowners in the town and all that. I think that's probably over. We're done with that.
Right.
Yeah. So now it's right. Submit the plan, do the public response, go in front of the commission.
They don't like us anymore, though, because they're not coming to Earth Day. I'm just saying.
Well, why would they expose themselves to that? I mean,
Yeah.
They are a sponsor of Earth Day.
particularly with all the guys out on the mountain. They got really involved.
They are
Been
sponsoring
very
Earth
vocal.
Day.
They are. Okay.
Yes.
No, they did send out, they're getting ready to send out another letter about updating the current polls.
I already got that.
So there was one before, I think they're getting ready to send another one out, which basically raises the,
It's the same
Double stack.
basic information, though, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's going to last all summer long.
Yes.
Correct.
Blah, blah.
I think the issue was, the commission had discussed too, they were supposed to come back, and they had said they would come back and talk about that, and it wasn't necessarily, Ralph, correct me if I'm wrong, they just seemed to move it without notice.
Yeah,
They
they're
were
already
supposed to come back,
bringing the
talk about
double
those things, and timing, necessity. So I think there was a general consensus that came out of nowhere that, and it came across as being spiteful. Maybe that wasn't the
Yes.
intent, but it just came across as being very
That's the
spiteful.
way the email that I read. It's like, you can't do anything about this, we're doing it. Kind of. Is
Yeah.
there, like, when they said they were going to go behind
The
on
original
railroad
Green Hill
tracks.
plan.
Yeah, the original Green Hill plan. There were options for different types of poles. This is,
And they really don't have an option here. I
okay,
mean,
I'm just
yeah, there's
asking.
not-
I didn't know if there
It's
were.
just a double
You
stack.
could do this nice
Yeah,
pole,
double
or you
stacking,
could do
that's
this
all they
really
can do.
ugly pole.
They're already doing it at the overpass down 29 and
You
55. They're already bringing the double stack down the ramps.
Where the construction is?
Okay.
They've
I'll have to
already
look.
got them double stacked up there and they're coming down.
It's
I'll
like
have
a
to look and
tan,
see.
yeah, it's not very pretty.
It's not pretty.
No.
You know, the VDOT, you know how they're taking
Where they're doing the
29 and 55
flyover.
over the flyover down there? They've already double stacked up there and they're coming down the ramp.
Yep, we're gonna put some poles in.
So that started about the same day we got one of the emails.
Emails.
It was like, yep, I've already seen them up there doing it.
I try not to go this way. I go up Cat Harpin and over through Heritage Hunt that way. I try
Sometimes it's
not
the
to go
only way
this
to go.
way.
When they say the double stacks are going to happen, does that mean like?
All the way down through Main Street.
I guess all of their scenarios, so even on very under 66, coming from the mountain. coming
We're
east,
not talking about the 230 we're not talking about the big massive kilowatt. They were always going to double stack to get extra power through here.
Right, what they have to do, there's a couple, so there's two justifications for that. One, they've got to get enough power to Amazon to start the project. And two, theoretically, it's a fallback line. And it's like, no, you can't put that much power on those lines. So it's to theoretically increase service to the area.
First time someone hits that pole and knocks it down.
Whatever you want to call it. We knew from day one that it's a by right use. You can't do anything about it. They actually don't have the requirement to inform us. They do. I mean, that letter went out to all the people that were impacted. It's not required, but they did it. I mean, as a courtesy. It was going to happen. Guaranteed. I mean, we knew that.
I don't have to like
There's no
it.
way to stop it.
But we don't have to like it.
It's right here on Washington.
Yeah,
It's
it'll
the
go
poles
all
out
the
there
way-
now,
it's the
yeah.
poles
We
out
gotta
there now.
modify the poles out there.
Create some visual clutter.
Yeah, yeah.
And I love the comment of, after we already moved the poles.
Yes.
After our-
All of that, yeah.
And,
Yep.
so, what a waste of money.
Because that's how the government works.
And maybe
So
the links.
the cost was on us, even though it
government?
should have been on them.
We're here to
because They
help.
were going to be moving them
Well, we could
anyways.
have shared it,
Yeah.
saved the poles. some money.
Okay, well, let's
Anyway.
move on.
What are you gonna do?
You're done, right, Ralph?
I'm done.
Okay, we'll go on to new business. This opens up any comments that you want to make,
Okay.
Marshawn?
So Denise and I have been talking about getting kind of a resource guide to you together. I think at once we've given some of you historic district guidelines and the like. Also trying to put together a cheat sheet on decision-making. So in other words, when you start looking at, you have some very specific criteria in here, but give you kind of the jargon, the verbiage, to when you're making a recommendation, you can say, scale and massing. I have an issue with the texture. I have an issue with the pattern. So it gives you kind of that
An abridged version.
kind of a bridge version, so you have a kind of a cheat sheet in front of you, so you can say, how do I describe what that, scale and mass, and then also there's community design guidelines about each of the segments are envisioned to look, have that readily available as a cheat sheet, so if you're saying, well, what are we looking for, or what do the guidelines look at this end of town, you have it right there.
Okay.
But Denise will be putting that together, and it's a shared conversation. Are there other things that you want in kind of this binder of materials so that you have it at your disposal, more so than maybe you already have right now? Did I say that right?
We have colors.
So we've got guidelines.
Do you have an excerpt in there from the zoning ordinance?
No.
Okay.
I'd like to see that in there.
Yeah, actually, that wouldn't be
Yeah,
a
so that
bad
we
thing
don't
for
have
us
to carry
have.
around the whole book.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have the whole book anymore. I turned mine in
So you
years ago,
have the-
never got another one.
Denise, what else are we going to put? What else were you thinking about? We're thinking about design guidelines, planning excerpt, or zoning excerpt.
Oh, look, we have a little map of the town.
Town map is in there.
Yeah.
Map.
Is that the current one? I didn't know that the line went back around Pace. I thought it went straight down. Maybe I was wrong.
No, we annexed,
We
didn't
did the boundary line adjustments to the
Yes.
entire
No, I
properties in
remember
town.
the annex, but I thought the line went straight. I didn't know that it curved back around Pace.
Oh, you mean across the street? You thought it carried on through into Green Hill? I can't imagine that
I
they
thought
would have
this
done that.
this
That
went
wouldn't have
straight.
made any
I knew that
sense.
this came over.
Yeah, so it used to go like,
Right, it cut through the property, right.
so I think that one's wrong. It actually should be here and go like
Yeah,
this.
I think it just gave us the property, it didn't give us anything else. And this is somebody else's property here.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a mess back here. Yeah, that's unhappiness. Okay. All right, if that's the current one, that's cool.
So that's the zoning map. Maybe there's a plan land use map in there? No, okay, I got it for you. That's the plan land use map out of the zoning ordinance, or out of the comprehensive plan. Maybe some excerpts from the plan. So the question would be how to get this to you. If you take it home with you, you may not bring it back.
Oh, I'm leaving mine.
So
Fill mine up.
I think the idea would be is that
Fine.
if you need 2 copies, okay, maybe we'll give you 2 copies, but this is one that you can have, or maybe we have a master one, but,
Now that we have a new sound system, there's plenty of room under here.
Except for that seat right there because it was falling off and I had to take it off. Sorry.
so these are the agenda folders, right? So maybe we need to figure out how to do that. Do we want to have a
Denise
separate agenda folder?
had said that you would have them ready Mondays, right, before the meeting? Didn't you say?
I normally send out the agenda packet on Friday, prior to the
Right.
meeting on Wednesday.
And then, so they would all be, so if you wanted to stop by and pick it up, to review it, you could do that.
If you would have the whole weekend,
Okay.
Monday, Tuesday to review it before.
If you wanted the actual physical book, it would be ready for you.
Right, well, and the other thing is, talking about online, it's like, I don't go to this book very often. I use Municode more than I use the book. I don't, and I brought my laptop in here occasionally. If we could get it in soft copy, it's sometimes a little bit rude to everybody have laptops up, but would be another way to have it, yeah.
So I guess we have it in this form. I understand the comment to be is that you leave your binders here. She calls you when they're ready. You come and pick them up, bring them to the meeting, and then just leave them here. And
Shouldn't
then,
necessarily have to call, I mean.
yeah, or email you. Or,
Yeah,
Usually
right,
lets
right.
us
So we
know.
know when the email comes out that they're
And if you
ready.
forget it or leave it at home, you get to wear the
dunce cap.
You get to wear the hat. Okay. So, that being said, do we have everything that we need, you think? For it? Okay. Anything else, helpful cheat sheets or references that you want in there readily
You're going to
available?
put those cheat sheets in here, though,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Now, do you want, like, how to move a motion? Do you want a cheat sheet on how to move a motion?
I mean,
Anybody?
you
Well,
have to
here's
think
the thing,
that-
for anybody new coming in.
Yes, because we do have vacancies.
We have a one sheet cheat sheet, just have it there on a plastic sheet, or maybe you keep it up there and say how to move a motion. You say how to move it.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
So what do we do with the agenda for each meeting? Like, I mean, do we take it with us now, or are you gonna just take them and, because normally I do keep these for a while.
Then you can
But,
take
You
yours,
can
right?
take yours with you.
Okay, good, 'cause otherwise.
Just take the month's packet with you.
Leave the binder, but take your agenda.
Take your
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there are council members who actually keep all of the agendas as well.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Your agenda.
Got rid of about 3 years' worth of them.
Yeah.
I've never thought I'd put in any of them, though. I've never kept them.
so another thing we'll talk about is you're getting ready to be at a very interesting crossroads. I've been talking with the developer across the street with the Payne Lane, ice rink coming in, the fairgrounds getting ready to come in. I think Villages of Haymarket's kind of at the cusp of that. So part of getting you ready for this is to give you the tools that you need. I think the biggest decision you're going to be asked to make pretty soon is demolition of buildings across the street. What I have spoken with the developer is, right out the gun, they wanted to take down every building on that corner.
Of course they
And I think what's,
Milk the land for what it's worth.
so what you do is you go to your tools, and what your tools say is they talk about, to the point where you're being raised, a primary consideration will be the extent to which continued existence would tend to protect irreplaceable historic places and structures and preserve the general historic atmosphere of the town. And so what I've had, and I may have gotten ahead of myself, is telling the developer, look, this is the crossroads. This is the biggest, dilapidated or not, this is the biggest concentration of structures that represent the town's history over time. I'm not just talking about the early 1900s. I'm talking about the structure. I'm talking about the bank building, Lane's Garage, the differences and variations. And I'll show this to you later. But so trying to get you the tools ahead to say, these are the different types of architectures that are in town, but it's significant. And so at one point they wanted to go 3 stories, which wasn't like anything on the corner, and we've kind of gone back and forth. We did meet with them to go into the house I tell you about, the Gossam House on the backside. Immediately it was, well, there's going to be expense to doing these types of things. I won't be able to park it. It was kind of taken from a different perspective. So we talked to them about, the town's willing to work with you. We're rescinding the parking ordinance right now. We shared that with them. Is there something here? Their concern is that their tenants would need a minimum amount of parking. So irregardless of what the standards may say for parking, which was to get away from focusing on surface parking. So we're dealing with some of those realities. Also, so we went through with the building inspector and looked at a lot of the garage, the one across the street on the corner. We looked at the garage. We looked at the general's house. I think the general's house, what was generally is the porch is what makes it look so bad. I mean, it looks bad a lot, but if you look at it without the porch, the bones of it seem to be good. So when these demolition permits come before you, you have the ability in this to push back and say, either A, show us the alternative, or B, say, well, these may make sense to come down, these may make sense to be incorporated or incorporated into your plan, and do those types of things. Now, cost is not necessarily a criteria for you to review.
Right.
So it's more of how do we keep these things. It may ultimately be a compromise. But you may want to get some basic information in front of you. They're going to have to justify why the buildings come down. There's some other criteria in your guidelines which say a photo, explaining the reason, requiring a structural analysis. Their architect.
They have to provide us with that.
Yeah, and there's their architect, but having someone can say, is this truly an issue where there is no ability whatsoever to use this building in any way, shape, or form? Is it 2 sheets away, you have the ability to kind of push back on that. And then there's other things to say if it's coming down, architectural surveys, professional documentation, demolition, only receipt of the building permit for construction. So
They also have to tell us, right, what they're going to replace it with.
correct. And so you're kind of at this crossroads where you have someone who's going to come in and make a significant investment. But at the same time, if you so drastically change that corner, to the earlier points, what is we really left reviewing?
Yeah.
Part of the design of those buildings is creating some of the elements in town. I think we had said that if the town had burned after the Civil War, although I had some fellow preservationists say that's not the town's history. You burn down. So you should do architecture that reflects later, more modern types of structures. So what am I trying to summarize with? Go ahead.
I actually have a question with that. So let's look at both sides of the thing here.
Okay.
So we're asking them to do engineering studies, et cetera. What do we have that demonstrates that that house actually has historical value? How can we justify it to them if they have to justify to us, and we're talking about protecting from a lawsuit and that kind of thing here? How do we justify, do we know the history of that house?
We have a landmark survey that was done. We've got to find those if we can find those out. There's a landmark study that came through. Now, you got to remember, there's history within the ordinances is not just person, place, or thing that occurred at that location. So
I understand that.
back here, it's the whole fish. To me, that was part of the discussion. The other part of the discussion was the architecture. That part of what you're looking at is creating the variation and the effect of over time. So if you in session raise the whole block, you've really removed any provenance or element that at one time you had these different variations of architecture in town, and you've not reincorporated them. You've really removed the basis for which I believe the historic district is trying to create. So I haven't answered your question.
Yeah, actually, partially you have. Okay. So if what we say, and actually that's a colonel's house. It's not a general's house.
I'm sorry.
He got promoted.
Well, no, it was known for years as the general's house, and then it was demonstrated that it was owned by a colonel. And that's why I'm saying that the history is important. And there's no proof that that house was ever owned by a whole fish. Never any proof provided for that. So if we're gonna push back, so history is one thing, but if you're saying provenance, which also is very important, what if they come back and say we will build a like structure or something similar, whether it's a facade, whatever it is? I mean, is that reasonable?
And I think that's where the negotiation is going to be. When I first spoke with them, I said, if you're going to do a scorched earth, and even if you build in kind, you're really replacing it entirely. So
in provenance and history is gone at that point, right?
Yeah, and being at the crossroads, how do you then defend when the firehouse wants to come in, and the bungalow wants to be torn down, the firehouse wants to be torn down, Lane Motors wants to be torn down?
It's a slippery slope.
In other words, so to me, is if there's flexibility, you have the flexibility, and say, okay, all these buildings in the town on that block are historic by the ordinance in the sense that they're over 50 years old. So what that says is they're historic to the town's history over time, being gas stations, being...
Well, no, and that's legitimate.
So you say that, so you say, okay, that. So you say, okay, well, the next step I took was, okay, of all those structures, do we specifically list one in our plan that is a contributing structure? In other words, we tie a person, place, or thing to it. And so what our ordinance, or what our comp plan says is the only structure, believe it or not, on that whole corner, other than the museum, is that Gossam house in the back. So with the hip roof.
Really?
The Colonel's house, interestingly. Now, we have it on an old tour that we used to do, but for whatever reason,
it never made it
on there.
Wow.
But nonetheless, it's to say, okay, is there opportunities, I think, with the Gossam house aligning with their plans? And we've pushed back and said, the continuity of facade, I think when we first talked about it, creates that transition between the front and the back. It's highly visible on Jefferson Street. So there's enough to say, okay, how does this be able to fit in your overall plan? With the general, or the Colonel's house, excuse me, with that, is there an ability you have that huge amount of open space on either side of it. Is there ability to put a new structure there next to it? Maybe not incorporate the entire Colonel's house, take off the back, kind of like, remember with Whole Fish, we had all that crap around it, pull it back to something that's viable. And I think Middleburg did a good job. If you go through Middleburg, they had next to the Most of you familiar with Middleburg?
Yeah, but I don't know what you're talking about.
So there was a house that was kind of set back, and they had all these empty properties on either side. The first ones to take it down. What they were able to do is come back. Now, it required the zoning ordinance to be changed, it required some other things to be changed, but allowed them to do infill on either side, park unified to the rear. So does it become a situation where you say, okay, are there other incentives? Do we want to do, if we're all going to decide, okay, of the 6 buildings that come down, based on a structural analysis and our more research on the history or provenance of those, of the 6, these 2 make sense to be incorporated into it. We will work with you on how to do it. And then with the architecture, what is it going to be replaced with? So does it make sense where I'm trying to go with it? You think you have the ability to do it. Now, they have rights. If you say no, if you recommend no, and I would say if you were to say no to some, no to others, you say why. They have the ability to appeal to council. And when they appeal to council, I think the council says, well, we had some costs with these buildings, regardless of how we got there. I think we have some ability to say that we have some pretty recent costs on what it takes to replace the foundation, replace all the siding, bring it up to code. That becomes a discussion for a minute. They also have the ability to appeal to the state or go to court. And so the state code says you can offer it up for sale for a year.
Right.
Someone can buy it. They can move it.
Right.
Now, they've already talked about harvesting. They can harvest some of the materials from here. I think the old stone house on Payne Lane, that used to be the stone from the Gossam store. I think that was a lost opportunity. I think when we do, the Gossam store had the same thing that's on the stone house is also on Lane's Garage. And so, when we do our master plan, does it make sense to maybe recycle some of that and make it part of maybe one of the patios? And you have a little thing that says, at one time, Gossam store stood here. This is kind of the materials that were done, and they have no problem with harvesting those types of things. So it's those types of negotiations you come in with that gives you, that you feel like you should have standing, having these cheat sheets, having some of the other information and background, having the museum do some more research on the background and history. Do we have a better write-up of a person, place, or activity, and go from there?
Right, because my concern is that from the architectural standpoint is as an evolutionary, that's fine, and that's standalone and it's valuable to the town. But there was no historical work ever done on that house back there, none. And I brought that up a number of times, and it still was never done. So if we don't have any kind of historical research, like until they went into the house and realized how it had been modified multiple times by multiple people over multiple generations, really, what's the value of the structure if you don't know what the structure is? Now, I don't know if that's what's happened on the Colonel's house, but, I mean, it's potentially the same issue there. What really has provenance and architecture, like a lot of the old buildings around here, I mean, they were rented out, they were, like Studley Manor, all kinds of stuff happened to them. So if we don't know what those buildings are, we know what they are architecturally, but if we don't know what they are historically, and I don't think we do, I don't think the town does, what we don't have a leg to stand on.
I think you do. So the criteria doesn't say that it has to be a history that we document. It can also be the architecture. It can also be what the groupings of the buildings mean. All those types of things are kind of listed in your criteria. So I think what it does is it beefs up. If you can say not only is it unique, an example of architecture over time, had someone that was there too. I mean, what I've heard about the Colonel's house is that he was one of the first houses to be built after the town burned post-Civil War. He was a Civil War officer that came back and built it.
Right.
That's anecdotal. Maybe we can find the more detailed history of those types of things. So when these applications come in, we're going to require, when they submit their permit, I'm going to say, based on the criteria, you need to provide a documentation or justification as to why. And if they simply say, well, we don't want to pay for it or they're unrecoverable, you can say, well, part of what we have to do is maybe you start off the conversation with, okay, maybe the stone house isn't a good example of our history over time. Maybe the garage is an interesting feature. We document it. We put it in our history, but maybe it didn't make sense to keep that garage anymore. Come up with those types of things based on the history that we can provide. Now, Denise and I can start putting this together for you so you don't have to, so in other words, you don't get it before you and then say, well, we can't do this until we get the information. We can start kind of putting it together.
Well, that's the problem. So part of this is if we don't have that information, then we can't make that argument. If we're making the argument that it's architecturally, just from a building standpoint, that it's architecturally significant, that's fine. I think we can do that. when you're talking, and that's, I guess, the place, but if you're talking person or thing, we really don't have that.
Correct. So you would be careful if you're going to make a decision based on that alone, that a person, place, or thing happened there, then yes, you would want to have the documentation to say those types of things.
Yeah.
So,
Is it your feeling at this point that they're going to come and want to raise all the buildings there?
I believe so. And so what happened, what first happened is they came in.
From a commercial standpoint, that makes sense, you know? You got
Well, a
land, you
clean
gotta do
slate.
something. Yeah.
So, and this is where I may have got ahead of myself, because I think what happened was I said, well, I don't believe that, and this is how it came to you last fall was, or 2 falls ago now, was it came to you and I said, I don't believe that simply coming forward with a scorched earth kind of thing is going to be looked on favorably. This is the one house we name as a contributing resource, incorporate some designs into your new buildings. That's what I would suggest. That's what they brought forward. And what it turned out was that one house, the Gossam house, was a leftover parcel, a leftover area on their plan. So it was no harm, no foul. His thing was he was just going to mothball it. And what I tried to tell is that, you know, if there's an incentive to give you additional square footage, we have people knocking on the door to get in these buildings. We can give you some real rent numbers that you can charge, you know, incentivize saying, okay. So I think what happened was it got lost was to say, I think what I stressed to them, do you have to go and ask for every single building to come down? And the ARB may find that maybe it's not appropriate to take them all down. So you have to be prepared for that. They seem to be focused on saying, well, the only one we really have to look at is the one on the corner, and that's it. Yeah, because that's the one that's invited in your plan. So I tried to backtrack and say, well, let's be clear. And then it became a discussion. I said, well, understand what it's supposed to look like, or what our community design policies look like, which is staying sensitive to 2 stories, those types of things. So they went in. Their architect, the first thing he said was, well, you know, maybe everything a foot up is fine, but everything else we're going to have to replace, and yada yada. Okay, that's fine. That's part of it. We understand it's a financial decision. But nonetheless, if we have the ability to give you more square footage, work with you on, and I didn't commit all of this, but we have a community, I just forgot your title, Main Street Coordinator, who can work with the county, because we have people all the time that want that provenance. We want that small little house. They want these small businesses that have the resources to do it. If we're the facilitator to say, okay, not only can you get all the square footage that you need, get additional square footage, and we can work with you to get, not promise, but work with you to put the word out that these are looking at it, get someone to salvage or harvest a lot of the other materials that gives you more money for your buck, why wouldn't you want to work with the town to be able to do it? So I think we wouldn't want to take an adversarial position when it comes forward, but I think we need to start the discussion with some expectations. Maybe there's some basic elements we can agree on. These other issues of what buildings to incorporate may take some more time to incorporate, and then come back.
When do you think that they will be coming with this?
Probably next month with their demolition permit.
It's fast.
So,
They've been looking at it for a long time.
yeah, they've been looking at it for a while.
No, I know, but
And that's what I'm saying. Essentially, we're unprepared. We don't have enough information to really make a full-bodied, multi-front rebuttal to demolish the building.
So you have 2 things. One, we now have the 60 days, right? So if they come in and
We
say,
brought
well,
60
we want
days.
to bring it back, you got the 60 days, that can get us some more time. I think there's some other things to
But I think that was a
do.
good point that you made, instead of approaching it as an adversarial process to try and bring them into the fold and want to work with us.
Or hell no. I mean, I think the first question is not hell no. I think we all need to generally agree that, unfortunately, we've let too many of these buildings go too far away. So I think on its face, to demand that they incorporate all those buildings, I don't think is realistic, and we're not going to get that reinvestment. But to the point where we can either add square footage by putting those buildings in, or creating some scenarios where he may not have a tenant now, but working with those so that the building doesn't come down now, but maybe after your plans get approved and you start building. So thinking outside the box. So what I can do is start working with Denise to get the information on those buildings that you need, get the landmarks register, which talks more about the architecture, pouring through our records to get some of the more anecdotal history, written history of who lived in those to see if there's any significance to it. Have that ready for you so that you can start making some recommendations based on that. But I think summary of all this is that that's going to be a significant change, and you're kind of going to be at the cusp of that and really change the whole dynamics of that corner.
Is there any way that we could have, like, when this information is gathered together, that we could all get together and come up with like a consensus of how we're going to approach this before we get with them.
So that we're not arguing up here or.
Well, first you need to see what they come back with. I'm not sure what they're bringing to you yet. I'm not sure what, I know they're bringing most of the buildings down, and there's some of their new architecture. I've not gotten a formal submission. I've just seen interim ones.
Right.
I think what you can do is you don't have to make a decision that night.
No, I understand
A work
that,
session,
but
maybe you do a work session,
that's
say,
what I'm
hey,
saying.
we'd like to have a special session where we just talk about this, have them tweak those things. So,
No, but when you guys, what I'm saying is when you guys get the information, we can all sit down and share this information and come up with a plan that we think is a good way to attack, not attack it, but.
Viable and not
Right.
viable.
well, I think it's more of just getting you familiar with the information. I don't know
Well,
that you
that's
need to
what I
come up with a
mean.
strategy right now, start thinking in your head.
Right.
But just start thinking about so one of the other things that may help you with that, okay, in Middleburg, and I'm not saying everyone compares Middleburg, forget Middleburg. In the council chambers in the historic district that I used to work in, they had they commissioned a photographer to go around and take pictures of all the structures, and they put them up in the council chambers.
Yes.
So when you guys are trying to describe, well, an element on the pace or an element on
It was
the
right there in
the
front
thing,
of you.
look at it. So there's a woman that's already done some of that.
For here?
It's all the same.
Oh, she was at one of the.
This is
Yeah,
Wade.
Market Day.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah.
How did I miss this?
I don't know, I saw her.
And you look up, they have a little history on the back, or a little
Yeah.
on the back. So it's kind of a sidebar exercise. So
There's things that they don't have. And this-
now, yes, some of this looks dilapidated, but you're calling yourself to what this is as good as a cross section. You know, we have the St. Paul's Church, we have the utilitarian firehouse, we have Old Lane's Garage, we've got the bungalow, we've got the brick building, we've got Winterham. You know, basically, a good example of all cross sections that we see in town. So, sorry.
And you kind of brought it up. So what is the history of the town? Do we even have,
No, we do.
do we?
Yeah, so in your comprehensive plan, there's also a book, History of Haymarket, and there's also some other,
Wrong in many places.
it is. I also have the plan history that's in the front of the plan history. The Prince William County also has archives with some histories. There's also a thick thesis that a grad student did a number of years ago where he poured through a lot of this. It's like this thick.
Is that available?
Yeah, I can get it to you. So those types of things you can begin to look through.
Right, because we're not, like you say, Civil War burned to the ground. We're not that. We're after that.
Yeah.
So if we try and say that we are Civil War, we were certainly impacted by that, but we are not that.
So to me, so I think one of the challenges with the design when they come in, so the first time come in with kind of an articulated facade, it had batten board, stone, those types of things, and saying the town hadn't burned. Well, we had more of the articulated facade down at Winterham. We have it at the Bloom Building. So to me is maybe we don't have to be Victorian there, because a lot of the garage isn't Civil War.
None of it is, right.
Eddie's place as his office is 60s ranch. So to me,
Was that built in the 60s?
Yeah.
Okay.
so you have, to me, what this shows an example of is the town built over time. So to me, when you're looking at those drawings, it shouldn't be we're trying to create what was right after the Civil War. To me, it's you want to create every kind of decade, something more modern, something more of a
Want
throwback.
to incorporate it all.
Incorporate it all. So
Yeah.
you don't have to make it all look like downtown Leesburg post-Civil War. And I guess that's the point of, because we burned down, we had variations in our history. We don't have this not cookie cutter, but this, all the buildings,
One style.
one style that's there. And so I think that's the opportunity. Something that Denise and I noticed too is that most of the photographs that we have of the town, we missed like 3 decades, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Really?
So we're thinking, that's what, we can go back to the throwback 70s when a lot of this architecture kind of came back. When we were the garage, that's another thing too I think we missed, is that we used to be all these garages. We used to be like the Route 1. We had the 84 Lumber, Moon, we had Lane's Motors, we had the Gotham Neon.
Well, that other garage got torn down, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had this time where it was kind of a gaudy, neon, backlit, utilitarian. That was the Haymarket when you drove through.
Almost like a Route 606 kind of thing.
Exactly, but we don't have a lot of the photographic history of that. So part of doing this too is to maybe have someone
I
commissioned to
might be able
do.
to get some of that for you.
I was going to say, can we send a call out to people for
So,
photographs?
yeah. So part of that is maybe having a part of a photographer being commissioned, or Jen's a good photographer too, but
Yes, she is.
basically say in 2015, this is what we looked like. So when you look at the back of the Haymarket book, you'll see it kind of neat in the back. You can see what Gossamer's looked like in the 70s and those types of things. So part of doing this is giving you a tool to be able to point to different styles when you begin this discussion. Not only this, but the fairgrounds and other ones, and saying, well, why couldn't you be more of these types of elements? Also create a record, I think, for the museum over time. Like, if you see that grainy picture in the back on the board, that's what used to look like in downtown. You see the old 70s cars, kind of gives you a neat perspective. So, so anyway, I think it's an interesting time. I think it's an exciting time for you guys to be here, be on the ARB. But I think you need to be confident in your ability to weigh in and make recommendations. It's not just aesthetics. You have the ability.
Because I like it, doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly. I like it, yeah. We need to say, well, here's some specific reasons. So this feedback is good. We'll start to get you that history and background and documentation. You have that available to the point where you are not comfortable that, you know, hey, this one that may be worth putting in, structurally, can you demonstrate to us? We have a building inspector that used to work in Salem, and he's had to deal a lot of buildings being repurposed, and what are kind of the, not shortcuts, but what are some ways you can make these buildings viable uses. I don't think we're looking for the historically accurate. One of the questions I got on the Gossam House was, are you looking to save all the cornices in the interior and those types of things? Here, I would argue that the old post office probably only has about, probably 60 or 70% of that is all new.
Yeah.
But to me, so we're not going for the, is it historically, is it, you know, accurate for the time? It's more of, you can look at that building and tell that that was part of the early part of the town's history. It looks original, which it is. That's what John's too. If you replace it in kind entirely, you kind of lose some of the provenance.
Well,
That's why the roof is bent. That's what gives that kind of unique. So when it's blue, you can't create that bend nowadays. You would have to spend a lot of money to make those types of things. So,
But we're going to be just like Gainesville. If we just raise everything, then we're going to end up being just like.
but it goes back to,
everybody around us.
it needs to be, one of the comments I got from the architect was, if these buildings, remember when I first moved in 2004, most of those buildings still had people in them.
Yeah.
They were tired looking, but they were probably more salvageable than they are now. And so what the architect was saying is that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it may have been easier to repurpose those buildings.
I think people
So-
get, I don't want to say an attitude, but an idea, just because they're not occupied, that means they're done. Do you know what I mean? Once they become vacant and like the glass got broken and the windows got boarded up, people start to think, oh, that's not salvageable.
That's just cosmetic.
Right.
Well, not necessarily. It depends on how much water's gotten in there and other things. I mean,
It is, and so there's some realistic,
It's already greater risk.
like the shack. You know, the accountant, I shouldn't call it a shack. But, I mean, really, it's kind of a cool thing. It used to be a sandwich shop, used to be a TV repair. That's the history we document. We photograph it. That's a good example. I think it's kind of a neat anecdotal history, but I don't know that if we're creating a walking town, it's really something we want there. Photograph it, document it, put it in the archives. It's something neat to talk about later on. But that becomes part of our history. I don't see how you could reasonably make it a viable use there. So I was on the train of thought there, and I forgot it too. I think a lot of times people see, it's hard to see past this aesthetic. When the porch came down over here, totally changed. You know, once you revealed the porch, the bungalow by the firehouse, unfortunately, they got all that T11 siding. But I've been inside the patio there. It's beautiful. It's the old, you know, angled, you know, the columns on the bottom. So a lot of times people just see dilapidation. They say it's beyond it. I think the other part of it too is that there's economic. I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox, going beyond my planner. I'm sorry.
Please go.
There is value. In other words, there is a lot of documentation on history that, in some ability of trying to keep somewhat the integrity, either through preservation or context-sensitive design for new buildings, to really create economic value. And it's not necessarily directly. It's the bringing more people into town. I keep talking about these two buildings, getting people excited, getting people interested again. Streetscape did a lot to get people excited. The town is actually making a command decision and doing something. It kind of creates its own vibrancy. I think, too, it needs to be clear, the west end of town is much different than the interior of the town. So, and kind of like what we're dealing with tonight, Village is a Haymarket. I think you're being context sensitive, but you're not being over the top per se. So that's where you kind of create some variation, but I think there is a tax dollar return eventually in making these types of investments. So anyway, were these types of things helpful?
Yes.
Okay, I'll see if.
Thank you very much.
As part of the CIP, I don't know, and I'll talk to Jen about maybe doing, maybe commissioning either her or somebody else to do, they snapped some photos. I think you guys have snapped some photos already, but a more concrete one. We'll get the documentation for you. And thanks for hearing me out. So
Thank you.
I do need those back, though. We've not bought those. She was kind enough to.
Let you use
And if you would like that one, is this 11 by 14, Matt, or is
Yes.
it 16? 11 by 14 is $25.
It's not bad.
16 by 20 is 40.
Business cards and.
I almost think that the town should buy one and have one up here.
So, any other feedback or other information you'd like to have? I appreciate you being candid with me about it, because you asking me these questions, those are the right things to ask. And at the end of the day, I think what you want to come across is that we're not going to tie ourselves to chains every single building in town, but if we can come up with a compromise, you give people the reinvestment, but you also keep the integrity intact. I said I was done being on my soapbox. I'm sorry.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on. Old business. Let's go to the task list. The only thing on the task list, of course, is the welcome sign.
Now that it's going to be tied into the development of the property. That's why we're waiting on that.
Okay, so we're going to hold that off until...
Even on this end?
Okay, let's
Yeah,
belabor
I
that.
think you're talking two different things.
Let's belabor that discussion for a second.
Okay.
So you have the ability to put a plan together, like if your branding is going to be the seal, which is what is there.
I do like it.
If that's agreeable to it, then I think what you do is translate it into a wayfinding plan. And what you do is you time it. Okay? It's easy apples to put on the east end of town. That's not going to change very much.
Right.
Obviously, the bridge is what it is. Southern end of town, you can go ahead and put it in. I think we have easements to do it. Do we want to switch out at Town Hall or the museum? They have that sign there. I think you've got to get ready to repaint that. Does it make sense to go ahead and do those, but have the plan for the rest? So as soon as the bridge is done, new sign can go up. As soon as Town Hall is done, when we're building it, you already have a plan or a logo for what you need that to look like, and it's got to incorporate in the plan. So I think you can still do some work on it and not have to wait, whether it be colors, whether it be design, whether it be some sorts of things. So
Did you have more besides, this is,
I think that's all I had in my, okay, that's the one you guys had.
Do they
had
all
done.
have to be the same?
No.
Yeah, that's,
So
there's going to be so many, that's what I'm saying.
So here's what I would suggest. You have money in your budget already that you haven't used, okay? Maybe we can have Brian come next month. Maybe he puts an RFP together. You create some basic parameters of what you're looking for, a wayfinding plan and design that it does these things. Town hall, museum, gateway entrances. Put that out to bid. Have someone, kind of like we did with the Hare, have them put that plan together, a master plan together. If you only have $3,000 left, then you put in a couple of them that are low-hanging fruit, and then in subsequent years, fund it.
The rest.
But you have it in place, so all you got to do is make decisions, but you can make with that now, so. Does that give you the guidance you're kind of looking for? So if that's kind of the consensus of the ARB, we can talk to Brian about coming to you. That's not something I can handle, or if it's
so
something.
otherwise, have somebody else come to us with designs for signs instead of us.
Well, if you already
having
have, you've done a lot of work on it already, so if you have a general idea of a branding or a logo,
Well, I don't know that did you guys ever?
did you guys get to the point where you found,
I wasn't part of that.
well, you
so I don't
excluded
know.
some, maybe.
Really in consensus.
Where
they
did
just
this
kinda-
logo come from? That?
That I don't know either because I was not.
That was contracted by the town.
I think Jen put that to Chief spearheaded that.
So that's been approved by,
Well, it's on.
Well, that's the town seal.
It's the
Okay.
town seal now, yes.
so this is approved.
Yes.
Okay, so if we want to use the seal,
Yes.
then this is what we use.
Yes.
Okay.
Which would only make sense, because then the only thing left that would still have the old would be the banners.
Correct.
The old type style.
Because at some point, the signs on this building or out front are all going to be,
Yes. So, go ahead, Rob.
Well, no, let me ask more of a technical question. The planning commission really doesn't have the ability to do anything. It makes recommendations. Does the ARB have any ability to spend money, or does that have to go to the council? I mean, we would make a recommendation of yada, 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 but I think the council would have to approve the money for the RFP and the funding and all that, wouldn't it?
Well, I think you already have the line item.
We have a
You already
line
have money
item.
budgeted.
For use,
Yes.
that we, the
Yes.
ARB, could spend?
yes.
Okay.
Let me
It's
double
already
check
went
that,
in.
but when the CIP last week
Yeah,
had
that's-
gateway
I wanna
entry
make sure that-
signs and
yeah.
those
There
types
is
of
a-
It was
things.
off of that one project plan that I put together
Is that,
2 years ago.
I just know
That's where
Jen,
it came from.
Ralph, it's a good point. We'll
Okay.
confirm that, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty confident that they've already made a line item.
no, Jen had already come to me and said that we did.
Okay, that's fine.
Now, what we may want to say is, do you have to get the council to officially,
Approve it,
you know,
yeah.
Approve the
spending the
expenditure.
funds?
Yeah.
Right.
Forward it to the council.
Yes, yeah.
Forward it to the council.
Yeah, that's fine.
But we would do the legwork as far as.
Well, yeah, and the planning commission does the
Reviewing
same thing. I
Yeah,
mean, you know,
yeah.
But the council, yeah, because I don't think, well,
No, we
I don't think we have
can't.
the ability to spend money, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's more of a technical issue than.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't spend over the budgeted amount, but we ask the process for,
But there is a line budget. There is a.
A
there is
budget for
budget-
us. Yeah,
For us.
okay.
So then my question, I guess, is do we want to meet together and just have a work session just on this?
Well,
Or do we want to have somebody,
I think you want to first define what are
Before it was just my
you,
opinion.
Yeah.
I'm game because before it was just my opinion on how I
On
wanted to do
doing
things.
things?
Yeah, and then
Or
of
do we
course-
want to have it, an RFP go out and,
I think what you want to do is statement of intent. What do we want to do? We want to advertise our gateways. We want to advertise our public buildings.
right?
Bam. We want those to be, off the top of my head, just some general parameters of what you're looking for.
Right.
Colors, is there a color that we have a brand already? And kind of allow them, as part of the RFP, to,
To bring in their designs
Bring their
and say
designs.
this
Right.
is,
But we have to tell them what we want.
Right, you
can't-
have to give them
Yeah, you can't go
parameters.
to an architect and say,
Right.
build me a house and
Right.
walk away.
Right,
So, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
it'll be.
we want,
Wrong.
we want gateway signs. So they come back in and say, well, does it make sense to do a monument? Does it make sense to do one? You just give them some general parameters
Mm-hmm.
of what we want to do. Most of those sign people have done wayfinding signs or systems.
Right.
But you say, we want to come back with a comprehensive wayfinding system that advertises all our public services, all our gateways. And they put it together. You can decide whether or not you want to use that branding or come up with a different brand. That's the seal. It's not to say that you can have a separate branding.
Correct.
So,
I think it makes sense, though, to have something that someone sees and realizes that's Haymarket.
It's consistent, that's important.
Yeah.
okay, so I guess before you have a work session about it, do you want to work with Brian or other staff members to say,
Please,
put some basic elements together and come to
Please.
you and do it? Okay.
thank you. Rescue us, yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I've sabotaged your meeting again. I'll try to be quiet.
See this, where's the other one?
We're still on our agenda, so.
Those are the old ones.
Right.
I think they were just other ideas, and then
Oh,
we've
gotcha.
added this one into it since this
Yeah,
has now
that
been
was the
done.
presentation that got us the line item.
This right here, base,
clips were
Okay.
is what you did to, okay.
from the presentation.
Gotcha.
So there is money.
I remember you did a PowerPoint too, didn't you? Some lengthy PowerPoint? Does she have that?
Pretty much I didn't, yeah, I think I passed that off to you. Didn't I pass off the PowerPoint? I'll hunt it down and shoot it out to you again.
Because you took photographs of all the gateways and stuff.
Yeah, and I put signs up saying these are the primary locations that we should be putting
Oh,
things.
no, I haven't seen that. Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Other part of that too is the historic district sign out on 66. We qualify for one of the brown signs,
Right.
Okay.
so
And
it's
how
part of your
much- No,
wayfinding.
we don't, do we?
No, we got to pay for it. I think it's like $6,000.
Right, they're pricey.
So going back to the
They're
CIP,
pricey.
But it goes on the federal right-of-way.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, we pay for it, but it's on their
Okay,
property.
so that's more of a CIP item, I think. That's not going to affect your wayfinding, but I think
Right.
it's something we need to have, is the historic district, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments about town signs or anything? Bring up enough there to launch off? Okay.
Thank you, Marcia.
Well, that's
Thank you.
the only real old business item that we have open at the time. So, we are now at adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So we adjourn at 10 till 9.
Do you want to hold on to these again then, since you did all that legwork and that's going to come back and